think is also finding a clear balance between the perfect being the enemy of the good. There are things that we need to start work because the state of really climate change and global warming is going at such a rate that if we don't take very proactive steps to shift that tone, we are going to be only in a worse and worse place. I think first and foremost, you have to recognize that the credits in Europe, those are under the CBAM compliance market, versus in Africa, those are mostly voluntary carbon market prices. And those types of credit structures are fundamentally different. So you cannot say you can't try to make voluntary one-to-one with compliance because there are different fundamentals below them. But what we're trying to do very proactively as the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative is try to leverage some level of transmission of lessons and clarity and robustness of underlying framework to make sure that we can really drive very strong message on high integrity, high compliance, high transparency in the way that African carbon markets are growing so that we can start seeing a stronger correlation between the data quality and the pricing. And also really trying to make sure that the pricing also effectively reflects the huge co-benefits that flow from a lot of carbon projects on the continent, looking at the communities around them. I think they're definitely very reasonable targets, and I think we need to be conscious that those targets were broadly built around projections on nature-based solutions being built on the continent. But it's also, as we build that capacity and awareness, it's also becoming very clear that there are much more than just nature-based opportunities on the continent. When you start bringing in technology-driven solutions, opportunities in direct air capture and removal through technology rather than just through nature-based trees and the like, the value of those credits can be much higher, and therefore the viability of those projections becomes even more possible, and they might end up being conservative. That is only, to a degree, the voluntary carbon market side. And if you look at the size and scale of carbon markets in the world, the voluntary carbon markets are 2 billion global. The compliance markets are 860 billion. So the size of carbon markets are huge. And the regulated spaces are infinitely larger than the voluntary carbon market space. But especially in the back of COP28, where you saw very strong statements and the convening of voices around delivering end-to-end integrity. I think what we're going to start seeing is an evolution of how that regulation is done, whether it is self-regulation around an agreed set of rules versus independent regulation in the voluntary carbon markets. When we go about doing scale planting and forestation, there are very key guidance fundamentals around making sure there's a clear link and correlation between what you plant and the indigenous environment. I think is also finding a clear balance between the perfect being the enemy of the good. There are things that we need to start work because the state of really climate change and global warming is going at such a rate that if we don't take very proactive steps to shift that tone, we are going to be only in a worse and worse place. Strongly disagree with that, because when you look at the simple realities that the acquisition of credits must be absolutely tied to very strong commitments to emissions reductions. So a company can't keep maintaining high emissions as business as usual and that's just simply buying offsets to bring that down. you must evidence how you're reducing your emissions, and then as a complement, add in credit acquisition. But you first need to do your own reduction. And there tends to be a lot of misstatements in that state because there's no intention for the existence of carbon credit markets to maintain or encourage bad behavior. I think we need to also better understand the link between carbon markets and development finance. Because if you look at carbon markets only about dealing with the offset acquisition, you're not really accounting for the huge economic and social impact that renewable energy, afforestation, water management and waste management schemes can have on the social environment they're operating in and trigger significant economic growth. This continent has levels and scales of renewable energy that are actually incomparable globally. First and foremost, it's significantly improving the data completeness and availability that informs those types of transactions. It is building capacity within governments and other ecosystem players within any economic space to understand the implications of the deals they're negotiating. So that it's one thing to do a 5-year deal on land, but if you're doing a 50-year deal at current price, how are you building in long-term growth change parameters into the way those structures work? But critical in that is making sure that we have some level of continental coordination on legal and policy frameworks. We're working very closely as ACMI to build a partnership with the AU Commission and AUDA NEPAD to see how we can build some level of correlation on the types of frameworks that are implemented across African jurisdictions, so we also can move to a point where the terms of deals being negotiated are not purely country to country or entity to country, but there's a regional or continental implication of those deals, and there's some level of rules of the game to those being put in place, because you have to accept that where you have political cycles, the timing of those deals also has a huge implication